project. I'd like to start with that first. And then I want to dig down into some concepts and some articles you've written and speeches you've given that I think are very, very relevant for today. That came before, November 5th. And now I want to see what's the update on your thinking there. So tell me about Article 3 project.
Okay, so the Article 3 project, we do political and legal advocacy, generally on behalf of, MAGA, new right, pro-Trump causes. So in the last few months, we've been very focused on getting the nominees confirmed, getting President Trump's cabinet nominations confirmed. So that's, we do a variety of things to try and help in that cause. Obviously simple things like media hits and op-eds, but also we do photo action campaigns, which we have a portal that makes it very easy for people to, with a couple clicks and 30 seconds, send an email to your specific senator telling them you expect them to confirm the nominee. And, we have a number of people on our staff who previously worked in Senate offices, and they always said the one thing that really gets the attention of a senator is not just the general talk among the public, but getting emails from their constituents, emails from the people who are going to end up voting for them when they come up for a re-election. So, we've been very successful with that. I think we had something like 200,000 total contacts related to Senate confirmations. And it's not just us who are saying this, but if you actually read, Wall Street Journal, other people who've reported on this, our campaigns have been an essential part of what's given a lot of these rhino Senate Republicans an attitude adjustment and made them realize they need to confirm President Trump's cabinet.
I think I've done some of those. On X, I'm just going in. Of course I'm going to do this. So Article 3 project, that started with the Kavanaugh debacle or outrage.
Kind of. I think Mike Davis was Chuck Grassley's senior counsel for judicial confirmations. So he was intimately involved in getting Kavanaugh confirmed, and also was on the inside getting Gorsuch confirmed as well. After he left Grassley's office, he realized there wasn't really a good outside group that was being aggressive enough to try and force the confirmation of these justices, and not just the justices, but we're talking about, also the appeals courts, federal appellate judges. So he started the Article 3 project, the Article 3 being the judicial branch,
exactly,
focused primarily on getting President Trump's nominees confirmed towards the end of the first administration. During the Biden administration, the focus shifted to fighting against the lawfare that was being conducted against Trump and his allies. And now that we've won again, the lawfare against President Trump and his allies has obviously petered out. There's still a little bit of it. There's like some lingering stuff in Arizona, for instance, and in Georgia.
It's hard to kill a cockroach. To extinct
they really should all go away, but they haven't. So now but we've shifted focus definitely towards, helping the Trump administration accomplish its goals from the outside. So again, this is just external pressure on the senators who might be reluctant to confirm. And we just put a lot of pressure on those people to do that. Also, we're trying to put pressure on federal judges to do the right thing and to, knock off all this lawfare. We're trying to put pressure on the Supreme Court to rule against what these liberal judges are doing with these temporary restraining orders. And we filed judicial ethics complaints. That has more, it's like more of a legal angle, but we try and find situations where judges are not acting in accord with their code of ethics. If they're, appellate judges.
We need to do a lot more of that.
Yeah. So we do a good amount of that. We did some of that in the first term. We filed bar complaints against liberal prosecutors. We did that against Kristen Clark, for instance, when it came to light that she perjured herself in her Senate confirmation hearings. We filed bar complaints. They didn't end up succeeding, but the bar complaints, the judicial ethics complaints, they have to be responded to. That itself can lead to some interesting outcomes. For example, there was a district judge up in Boston, I believe, or in the First Circuit, who wrote an op-ed that was extremely critical of Sam Alito, and so critical that it was actually in violation of the code of conduct for judges. Like, you're not supposed to bring disrepute on the judiciary. And the end result of that was that the First Circuit agreed that this judge had violated the code of ethics, and he was forced to write a formal apology to the court and to the public. Maybe that doesn't sound like much to the general viewer, but if you were at all familiar with the behavior of district judges and their egos and their arrogance, the idea that they would put a formal apology in writing is something that they're unbelievably loath to do. So we were pretty happy about that outcome.
That's lovely. But I got to say, the craziest thing is, who could ever criticize Alito?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, that's just
it was
weird
over
to
this
begin with.
dumb upside down flag nonsense. I mean, if you remember it, right?
I
The
know,
whole
but
his wife put a flag upside down, and that means Judge Alito is unpatriotic, or Justice Alito is unpatriotic, or
compromised
something.
or too loyal or to somebody.
Right.
Well, digging down on some of the articles that you've written and some speeches that I think are so relevant today. And one of
Yeah.
my favorites is the idea of, it's just a beautiful name, wartime conservatism.
Right.
I really want you to explain that versus peacetime, and also tell me, is there such a thing as legitimate peacetime conservatism? Because are we ever at peace? So what does it even mean? Yeah, jump in. Tell me about wartime conservatism.
So, I mean, this was obviously written back in 2019, still when there's this, in a sense, I've won this debate, right? It's one of these debates that I don't feel like I have a need to press a lot anymore, because the combination of the behavior of Democrats and how Republicans involved, almost everybody has come around to my point of view. But back then, you have to understand that there was sort of general, still like libertarian impulses and impulses about bipartisanship and not rocking the boat and trying to go along to get along in the Republican Party, and people, all the never Trump types who were saying that they didn't need to vote for, it was not a good idea to support the president. They should be hoping, they should be above it all or whatever. And I was. So the inspiration, well, I mean, comes from two places. I mean, first off, the original idea of this peacetime-wartime distinction comes from The Godfather, the movie. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's where, Tom Hagen is famously told, when he's going to be out of the discussions about what, Michael Corleone's plans are for war, is like, you're not a wartime consigliere, Tom. The idea is he brings in his dad and plans the assassinations of the heads of the other five families.
We all love Tom, but he needed to be out at that point.
Right. At that point, right? Like there's a certain, and then there's a Ben Horowitz, who's David Horowitz's son, also Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm. He had a great book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is generally about business leadership. And it's a really interesting business book because it's taking the perspective of what happens when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
He points out that a lot of business books are written from the perspective of a CEO who's kind of on top of the world, running a company that is just dominant. And the concerns of the dominant company that's not really worried about competition are so dramatically different from the concerns of the company that's at war, that's in a fight for its life, has really sophisticated competitors and risks being bankrupted or just driven out of the market. And he pointed out that the way that a wartime CEO, is what he was called, would behave is so different from a peacetime CEO. That a wartime CEO uses profanity, is unbelievably aggressive, sets a tone of zero tolerance for nonsense, isn't trying to balance interests and be above it all, and set culture. The culture is like, we're pirates, we're at war, we must win, or we win or we die.
It's that whole thing of the strongly worded tweet or post, or coming out and using strong words of condemnation at a podium at a little press conference, and then they go away, but nothing ever happens. Or politely strong. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if I would call it polite, but you're getting right to the heart of the fact that we've been operating as if we were at peace, or as peacetime. And are you talking about America, or patriots, or the Republican Party, or at all? Who's the CEO?
I'm talking about the right. So I would say, it's bigger than the Republican Party. It's also bigger than conservatives, right? You might consider the right to include more than conservatives, right? So I'd say anybody, the right, broadly speaking, right? The right is in a wartime environment because, and the reason I say this is because since 2016, the left has been extremely invested in doing things like their primary political platform is actually structured to marginalize us and permanently remove us from power. That's if you actually think about the core of their platform, it is to ensure that Democrats win in the future. They don't really care about the other stuff. I mean, immigration is a classic example, right? Why are they so insistent on opening the borders despite the fact that it's a wildly unpopular issue? Because they realize that if they successfully increase immigration sufficiently, they will have a completely durable electoral majority in this country. So that's why they've been so aggressive about open borders and path to citizenship and all the rest.
And also the thing about Doge, it seems as if it's completely contrary to their best interest to be for wasteful spending, fraud, abuse of power, corruption, but yet they know that I think U.S. aid is very important to their maintaining power. Is that the case?
Right. So they are inherently in a wartime mode always. They are if you think about all their key policy planks, they're almost always things. There's a few that are not. There's a few that are just sort of crazy woke religion stuff. It would be the way to think about it. But outside of that, it's focused on stuff. It's like if you assume that the Democratic Party is trying to maximize its own power for the long term, and how would they behave? And then you look at what they do, and they're like freaking out about Doge because basically their entire activist base is funded by taxpayer. Just brilliant strategy if you can get away with it. But it's something we should be opposing. So, again, so peacetime versus wartime, right? Peacetime assumes bipartisanship, assumes everybody's, kind of entering the democratic field in good faith. We will win because our policies are better. If your policies end up being right and good, you'll win. Like that sort of attitude. And wartime says, no, actually, like our adversaries are trying to permanently marginalize us politically. And as a result, we need to take that seriously, stop them from doing that, and do what we can to marginalize them unless and until they start behaving in a peacetime way. So it's actually kind of similar to, I don't know how familiar you are with things like reciprocal altruism and the evolution of cooperation. But the idea is that if somebody is, in a prisoner's dilemma, if somebody's cooperating, you want to cooperate. But if somebody is always defecting, if you are always cooperating, if you're always holding out the olive branch, then you're the sucker. So the idea being that if in a wartime environment where our adversaries are always defecting, doing things that are not good for the country as a whole, but selfishly good for the Democratic Party, then we have to be willing to defect as well. We can't just be cooperative and do things that facilitate their attempt to marginalize us. So that's sort of the big high level, what is the idea behind wartime versus peacetime conservatism? It's saying wartime conservatism is very, very pragmatic, focused on what I would call meta-political issues. So the issues that control how other issues get resolved. That I want to
dig down deeper into. Absolutely. Yeah. That is so important. You had 3 points about, no, those were your solutions. What works, pragmatism, and meta-political issues. And so just kind of break that down in your summary.
So, right. So I would say that there are political issues that are the normal debates. Abortion is a good one, a good example. Something where people can have strong feelings one way or the other, but it's an issue that's political. It doesn't, however abortion gets resolved, doesn't control really how politics will work in the future in terms of like who has votes, which parties are in power. Meta-political issues, because they directly impact who has political power and how much of it, control how the subsidiary political issues get resolved.
That's the most important thing
immigration,
to me. When I looked back at 2016, 17 with President Trump, I thought, actually, thinking about like a war room council, like at the first day, somebody should have said, okay, first we have to go for election reform because we're not going to win a second term. Then we got to look at big tech because they're going to destroy us in the next election.
Yes.
And then we have to, and I literally was thinking, where is everybody screaming about this? And then we have 2020. So let's dig on those, down a little bit more on those.
You immediately understand what the right issues are to be thinking about, right? It's immigration, for the reasons we discussed earlier, determines the composition of the electorate. Big tech is another meta-political issue, because if you're able to censor free speech, you can control the debate, which controls how every other issue gets resolved. Courts, if you control who's on the court, if you control the Supreme Court, the appellate courts, you control how the law ends up being interpreted, so you control the resolution of other issues that way. So those are I would call those like the big 3 meta-political, and then election integrity. And the universities are another one, because it determines how our kids are educated, which determines how, what the future electorate looks like as well. So universities, election reform, election rules, courts, immigration,
big
social media censorship.
Speech. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are, some of those have been resolved, right? I think in many ways, big tech free speech, Elon Musk just decided on his own to spend $40 billion and solve the free speech problem.
I love that.
Like I didn't account for that, and back then, this is one of those wartime, peacetime debates. I was advocating very aggressive regulation of big tech companies to basically force them to treat speech equally, to treat platform access like a civil right.
I want to take a moment because I thought that was so brilliant. And I will say this, that we won with X through, the actions of Elon Musk. However, I don't think we're secure. And I thought if you could explain, I think this is exciting. The idea, everybody's going after Section 230, which I think was a mistake once I got to understand it a little bit better, what the whole point to Section 230 was. But when you start talking about speech and civil rights and how our speech on social, or maybe having to do with Google, YouTube as well, should be protected as a civil right. And civil rights, which I didn't ever equate this before, a civil right is something that even private industry has to respect or obey according to the law. So could you flesh that out a little bit? Because I think that's going to be a future thing anyway.
Right. I mean, if you think about, what are civil rights, we have them in our law. What they, we think about them in terms of not being a victim of, say, racial discrimination or sex discrimination. They're, our country made a commitment to equal protection under the law and non-discrimination, but we as a society decided that it was insufficient to simply say the government couldn't engage in that kind of discrimination. In order to make that commitment meaningful, we had to say private companies were able to engage in that kind of discrimination as well. So that's the logic here, right? And I think it particularly applies to free speech. Simply saying, in a world of dominant social media monopolies that are effectively serve as the entire public square, that only government is prohibited from restraining your speech.
Yeah.
Private companies can do whatever. It's not a sufficient protection. It means that the First Amendment isn't meaningful anymore. And especially if you get this sort of subtle partnership between government and the tech companies, which is what happened. We know that. But the idea being that, the way to solve this problem is to say, actually, no, the right to speak on these social media platforms needs to be treated like a civil right. And private companies should be treated as government entities for the purposes of the First Amendment in this regard. And that's a novel view, right? The normal Republican libertarian view for years has been, don't create new civil rights. Just don't let the private marketplace do what it wants. The free, the marketplace of ideas will solve all the free market will solve all problems. If you don't like it, start a competitor. All these arguments were just facile in the context of social media companies because they're natural monopolies. Obviously, there's a reason Elon Musk didn't build a new social media company. He bought X, and he bought the public square. Really amazing that it was only available for $40 billion. In retrospect, I think that'll look like one of the cheapest purchases ever.
Exactly. I think the day that he bought it, we should make a national holiday.
Yeah.
I liken it to something like this. Google is really the worst offender of all. And the most powerful of all. Of course, X is beating their butts in a lot of ways, but Google is it. And YouTube. And what happens is this: if you're a business out there, but Google and YouTube owned every road to every business in the world of the United States, let's just say, even every alleyway and driveway. Essentially what Google does, it did it to our company, is it blocks off the alley or the driveway or the street to your business. And then you literally go out of business because nobody can find you. Or it's difficult to find, so you shrink. And Google's been using this for years. I mean, I think that's unequivocal and not even really an arguable question. So would we allow companies to own the streets to businesses and be able to then put up a barrier or bypass that road so they couldn't receive customers or clients or patients or what have you? No. So this whole idea of yours, but I had that in my mind, but I didn't know the legal way that would work out. And you're saying create a new tort. How would that be done? Would it have to be passed by Congress or? Yeah,
you need a new law that creates what's called a private right of action, right? That basically says people have a right to use these social media platforms. If that right is violated, they can sue the company. And not only win damages, they can win an injunction forcing the company to restore their account. attorney's fees for the cost of litigating and punitive damages, just or statutory damages, like essentially an agreed on fine for what it does. And that would just stop it immediately. And it doesn't. Oh, the reason I proposed that is because I think, whenever you start increasing, you saying that the government should do something, the immediate reaction is like, oh, so you mean more like government regulation? It's like there's different ways to do regulation, and some of them are decentralized. Like you don't need a giant new bureaucracy if you create a private right of action, then you're basically having the enforcement of the law be handled by
the individual
victims and trial lawyers.
And the opposite of it is that when people were going after I think it's 230 regulation, where I believe that they gave, Congress gave, or maybe it was a regulatory agency, gave protection, treating these big monopolies as if they were public utilities. Is that a good way to say it? But then the problem is,
I wouldn't say that public utilities. It was more that they were treated as they weren't. They were given a broad immunity to remove content without being seen as the speaker of it for defamation purposes.
Oh, okay. But to give that privilege to them so that they could have this incredibly profitable industry and monopolies and everything, we give them this privilege of, just like vaccine makers, you can't get sued, right? So we give them this power. They build up these indestructible monopolies. The public square is on their platform. We have no choice. We can't just say, well, we'll have great conversations on, another small platform that nobody knows about. So we have to engage on X and Facebook and YouTube and all the rest. But then they use that privilege that they were given, and it is a privilege that they were given, to then destroy individuals. They can't be sued because I said something that was against the law on their platform, but then they can remove me and do that with impunity.
Yeah, and then they started using that power that they had for political purposes. They started to try and for the interests of the Democratic Party, and there's no reason that the right should indulge that. I think the big part of where the right kind of steered away is because there was again a very strong libertarian impulse that says like the only way to solve problems is to remove regulations and not to impose new laws, but you basically, no sword, only shield. So the way to do it was we'll remove Section 230 immunity to solve the censorship problem. And it's like, well, actually that doesn't really do it for two reasons, right? 230 is all about defamation liability. And it's like, it doesn't. So 230 basically says, okay, the companies are now liable for the speech of people who get defamed. But the idea is that this is a solution to the platforming. Like the platforming victim gets nothing. Moreover, if anything, it incentivizes the companies to go more further in the direction of being strict about speech regulation, because now they're liable for everything that shows up on the platform. So if anything, they're going to get more censorious. So I always thought 230 was, it was a extremely blunt weapon, right? The threat to remove 230. And it's like, as a person, again, wartime, like, okay, I'm not going to give up a blunt weapon if it's the weapon available to me.
Yeah.
But I would say that, as a party, we should be looking at actually passing a new law to solve the new problem.
That's right.
And I think that's something that people are always reluctant to do. The other thing they want to do is they want to use old laws to solve new problems. It's like, well, the problems are not, the antitrust laws were not thinking about monopoly social media power and resultant censorship. They were thinking about, price fixing and price controls and monopoly profits.
So it's a brand new kind of monopoly.
Exactly.
It had nothing to do with that. Oh, that's interesting too.
And so you have to think about, get over the reflex. I mean, again, the conservative impulse is to say, we don't need new laws. Old laws should be able to solve the new problems. Well, not always, right? Sometimes there's a new problem and it actually requires a new law to solve.
The tech social media industry. And if the new law is written right,
it'll be targeted.
Yeah, the tech social media industry and free speech and all the rest of this is what changed my mind very dramatically on that. Because I had these uncomfortable feelings that this conservatism wasn't accomplishing anything, or this libertarianism, and that we need a new way of thinking. And I thought you distilled it beautifully. So let's talk about some more of your. By the way, is the Trump administration I would assume you would say that it is a wartime administration. Yes. Did they read your? Did everybody read their article and all of that?
I wonder sometimes. I think sometimes I just think that, I don't write much about wartime conservatism because I feel like everybody agrees now.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's any disagreement. You have to go back to where the debate was in 2018, 2019 on tech censorship to remember that I wasn't always in the majority, that a lot of people were saying, oh, we shouldn't do X. And I think, Elon Musk kind of changed that by buying Twitter. So it became less salient. Nobody's as worried about being censored. But until Elon Musk bought it in like 2022, I basically think I had already won the debate internally on the right. And so I've had some of these articles that I think wartime conservatism was a very influential article. I think a lot of people that are in the administration
I did not read it at the time. And when I read it, I thought, well, this is just plain brilliant. And what I'm seeing with the Trump cabinet and the entire administration is they're on a war footing. And I mean, I'll tell you, there's a lot of adrenaline in war, which I have never been part of. But just say I watch a great war movie, there's adrenaline and excitement. There's also the carnage and the bloodshed. But I don't think that our side is going to be the losing side. I don't think there's going to be a lot of bloodshed and carnage and casualties on our end. But of course, we have almost 4 years to go. It feels like we've been doing this for 6 months, but it's only been 30 days since he took office. So he is a wartime president. His cabinet and all of his nominees are war term. They're fighting in battle. I mean, it's incredible. So are they losing on any battlefront? Are there battlefronts that have to be opened up that if they just haven't gotten to it yet, or maybe they're not even aware that this should be a priority?
I don't know. I honestly haven't thought to myself, man, I wish the administration was doing this. They're really doing a lot of different things. Everything, they're from their appointments to DOJ to foreign policy, to just how aggressive they are, being almost on every axis of the government. Like you can tell there's a reason that the bureaucrats are freaking out. It's not like the first administration where they were able to just kind of write it out. And, the White House was not really as agile and familiar with the controls, familiar with what their power was. Now they're really deeply understood. They had 4 years to think hard about what they would do differently this time. And as did President Trump. And it's very clear, President Trump is not a person who likes to admit mistakes.
No.
And so you never really hear him do that. But based on how differently he's behaving now, as opposed to how he did throughout his entire first term, you can tell he's thought really, really hard.
I did see
his team has too.
Made a comment that I was like, honey, to my husband, I think President Trump just admitted making a mistake, because he said, well, I may have made a little bit of a mistake about this, this very subject in of his cabinet and his appointees and in his first administration. So I think he almost admitted that. But everything has changed. Everything has changed.
Yeah.
I'm looking at, we just mentioned tech, and civil service reform was another one of your major bullet points of these are solutions for a wartime conservative presidency and executive branch. So tell me about your thoughts on those two cases, Morrison and Humphreys. And it looks like that was another time where I thought, did they read this article? Because you said one of the solutions was just start firing people so that these cases, that they're technically, that the norm. If you notice how they keep using norms instead of it's illegal, they just say it's against norms. And I was thinking, okay, well, there's a new normal. Okay. We don't care about the old norms, but start firing people. And so we have the Schedule F, we have firing people so that these independent agencies, is that even legal? So kind of go through those few points there.
So there are a few independent agencies. I think really the biggest ones are supposedly independent. That's the FTC and the FCC, Federal Trade Commission, Federal Communication Commission. They have multi-member boards. And the idea here is that under a case called Humphrey's Executor, those are these multi-member independent agencies are the few that the president doesn't have just unilateral removal power for the people.
Federal
I mean,
Reserve
in general,
too, I bet.
Federal Reserve, I think that's right. I don't know. Good question. We need to look into that, but I know the FTC and the FCC. And I'm of the belief, I mean, people don't understand what the unitary executive is. It doesn't mean that the president has all the power. It means he has all the executive power. It means that there's no executive power that's hidden away with other people and other agencies. It means that Article 2, Section 1, the executive power of the United States shall be vested in a president of the United States. That means what it says, that all the executive power is there. And I think in a speech I gave at NACON, one of the things I advocated for was we should be very aggressive. And if we win, we should pressure the Humphreys executive precedent. Like we should, try and fire people on the FTC. And we should treat it as not constitutional. And just recently, DOJ announced that they wrote in a letter, I don't know to who, but they wrote in a letter that says the Department of Justice does not believe Humphrey's executor was rightly decided, and we won't defend it in the courts. We are going to go ahead and try and remove that. And the reason this is so important is it's basically we think of the civil service and the entrenched bureaucracy as obviously a democratic power center. Obviously, right? Like DC votes 90% Democratic. It's a huge Democratic power center.
97, 98, 99%. It's not 90%.
Right.
Voting Democrat.
And so but that's not, the Constitution makes it pretty clear that the president should be in charge of all these people. And the idea that they would be operating independently is nonsense, right? I mean, the whole idea of an independent Department of Justice is a meme. It's not grounded in the Constitution at all. The Department of we actually have a good system where, the president has the duty to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. The Attorney General reports to the President of the United States. So the Department of Justice is not independent.
Why? Where did that come from? You just said it's a meme, but you hear these things, and the average Joe or Josephine says, is that in the Bible? Is that in the Constitution? Where does it come from? We just keep repeating and regurgitating these things, but it's not true.
Right. I think a lot of this stuff comes out of the post-Watergate era, where Congress tried to rein in the executive pretty dramatically. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of norms, they succeeded, right? Not necessarily as a matter of the Constitution. The Constitution wasn't amended, but as a matter of the laws they managed to pass and the sort of culture that they created coming out of Watergate, like what the Supreme Court started ruling, things like that, there was just this sense that, DOJ should be independent. The White House needs to be controlled. And I think the best trick is whenever you hear independent, you should think unaccountable, right? That's what that means. Independent means unaccountable. Independent means there's no democratic check. They can do what they want. And I just got back from a trip to Israel. And
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so I saw firsthand what that means, actually, because, obviously Israel, wonderful ally. But aside from that, they have an insane judicial system. A judicial system so crazy we can't set their cases.
We got to talk about that. I'm having a very special guest from Israel just to talk about the Supreme Court reforms and the fact that they literally almost went to civil war, and the deep state in Israel is as deep as in America. They just don't have enough. We have almost as many people in our government as they have total population. So it's a little different, but you're right. That's crazy. So going back to this with regard to the independence, it's incoherent, right? It's incoherent. It's sort of incoherent like this. We have these lifetime dedicated civil servants, and they're, of course, unbiased, and they have great character, and their ethical standards are incredibly high. And then we have Elon Musk and anybody who comes to work for a Republican administration or Trump. So these unelected bureaucrats, nobody elected him. They're okay because they receive sainthood sprinkles, fairy dust when they enter in, and somehow they become of a higher moral character than all Americans. But then Elon Musk being an unelected, I don't know, not even bureaucrat, but being unelected, that's bad. So isn't that kind of the same meme?
Yeah, it's a very similar one. And so, here's a key meme to understand. People will say that, this is common everywhere, especially in this debate, our democracy is being undermined by increased politicization, right? Have you ever, that's basically the meme, the Democrat, right? Think about that for 2 seconds and understand like how ridiculous it is to say that. Yeah, like you're politicizing the bureaucracy. It's like, yeah, you mean democratic accountability. That's what that means. And again, it's also the meme of like whenever they say our democracy, they really mean our bureaucracy or our oligarchy. That's actually what they're saying. So yeah, I think it's it's the difference between the actual structure of our government as written in the Constitution and our laws, and contrasted with the memes about what our government is created by the media, the academics, and the civil service working kind of in concert. And those memes are not our law, but those memes everybody sort of assumes are kind of our law or thinks that that's our system because they've been told that, but that's not actually our system. And I think what President Trump is doing, and he's made clear within a month, he's like, no, this government is going to operate according to the Constitution and the actual written structure of our government with a unitary executive and an accountable, democratically accountable government. And nobody is going to be independent of democratic accountability. Everybody is going to have to report to us. And that is what's causing this enormous, overwhelming freak out by the left and the Democrats, because they understand that what that means is the Republicans are about to destroy a major power center of the Democratic Party. Which goes back to like, what does it mean to be a wartime conservative? Do what you can to destroy your adversaries' power centers. This is, maybe there's more, if you were asking me at the beginning, like, what should the government do? I mean, there's probably more to be done on the university front. We'll see, that's trickier because it generally, it's not as simple as just changing the way changing the executive orders. There's some new laws that would probably have to be passed. But, we're going after one of our adversaries' major power centers. They don't like it. They're freaking out about it. But the problem is the law's on our side, and we're going to win. Because,
it's sort of setting aside this. Gad Saad, I just interviewed him, and he was talking about his new book. This called not toxic compassion, suicidal empathy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's bad. I've got it right there. Anyway, he wrote the I mean, sorry, they're great little phrases, suicidal empathy. And this empathy that, I don't know, or this fearfulness of aggressive, strong behavior. And this is why I think somebody was talking about how Tom Homan, if anybody said, who's the sexiest person alive today? Would it be so-and-so, so-and-so? And somebody said, Tom Homan, because this is a man's man and it's a woman's man. I am so happy to, instead of seeing these fragile, we want to be polite and we want to be, what is the Christian term that I cannot stand being
charitable?
Used? Not charitable. That is pretty darn biblical. No, winsome.
Okay.
Winsome. We're all supposed to be winsome. So we're supposed to basically lose really badly the entire culture, the country. God's going to reject us and punish us for, everything that we've allowed to happen. But we'll go down as being winsome. And isn't that the greater, ethic that we should do?
Yeah. Losing on principle is losing. That's what that sounds like to me.
I loved your couplets. That, I don't know if that was one of them, but it sounds like it. One thing, let's see, wartime. Peacetime conservatives renounce government power and rely on invisible hand mechanisms, like let the market take care of it, the invisible hand. Wartime conservatives recognize it. Oh, no. Wartime conservatives don't hesitate to use government power to achieve conservative ends. If we're right, we've got to fight and war and battle is not an easy thing. And sometimes you talk about CEOs that swear a lot. I've talked about this. President Donald Trump and every other CEO and guy on a construction site swear to an offensive level for most of us. And I say, yeah, but you know what? I want my David. I want my Homans. I want my Trumps. And if they swear, and I'm not saying Tom Homan swears, so be it. Still win. Save Israel. Save America. I don't care. And then we'll reform your speech later.
Yeah, right. I think one of, the person, oddly enough, the Democrat I like the most, and I'll say, is Rahm Emanuel. And Rahm Emanuel is like the one guy who I'm like, I really wish he was on our team. I really do. There's not a lot of Democrats where I think that, but I listen to Rahm Emanuel. I'm like, that guy gets it. He gets politics at a very deep level. Similar to Carville. Carville will be the other guy I think about this way.
Gross.
This sort of,
I mean, no, we're not going to go to Carville.
I don't like Carville, but it's like I don't like Carville. I just wish he was on our team.
But you know what he does? He says what the Democrats are in a wartime position, but they are fighting dirty. They're not fighting valiantly.
Yeah,
they're fighting dirty. It's just filthy what they're doing. It would be sort of like, here's two armies. The Democrats are here, and they're going to take the women and the children, kidnap them, put them in dungeons.
Yeah,
they're gonna do all these
they'll do horrible. They do horrible things with power. We know that about Democrats, right? Like the reason I like Rahm Emanuel is that I saw him. This was in 2017 or something, like right after the election where Trump won. He was like, sometimes you just got to win. If you don't win, you don't get it. You don't get to do anything. I'm not interested in losing on principle. I have no time for it. Like if you want power and you want to achieve the things you think are important, you must win. And that's so
what
simple,
I remember hearing. I don't know if it was after 2020, the election, where somebody was starting to say, maybe it was Charlie Kirk and others, Steve Bannon, whatever, it was about getting out there and signing up voters. Somebody said, we don't want to try to convert the leftists. That's practically impossible, and it's a waste of energy. What we want to do is find Republicans and get them registered, because they're Republicans. They just don't vote because they're not registered.
Yeah.
And so and this early voting that we all eschewed, right? No, let's get them to early vote. Let's forget all of these highfalutin principles, and let's actually win, because then we can actually do things if we win.
Right. Yeah, that was, I think every day in the run to the election, I was just screaming at people like, have you voted yet? Have you voted yet? Have you voted yet? Like, that was what I was using my Twitter for, right? You've early voting and you say, have you voted yet?
I was talking to every plumber that came in my house. I had so many people go through, and I had them all converted by the time I wouldn't pay them until they joking. Sorry.
That's funny.
Can't pay that bill. Yeah. This other couplet I loved, because this has been this false dilemma that's been put in front of us for years. I want to find out how's the Trump administration doing on this. Peacetime conservatives worry about setting precedents that Democrats could exploit in the future. Wartime conservatives recognize that Democrats do unprecedented things all the time. Nothing we could do is going to force them to play dirty, right?
Correct.
Tell me about that.
This is the key insight is, and God, this happens so many times. Like, Republicans would make this argument. It's like, well, or like the peacetime people. Yeah. They would say, well, Republicans better not do that, because then, boy, Democrats, they might do something crazy. Oh, they'll exploit that precedent. And it's like, do you just have amnesia? Democrats do things that we complain about as unprecedented all the time. They do not behave on the looking at what we did and then therefore what they can now do. They just do things. They just do things. Like, think about the judicial filibuster. This is a classic example. There was no precedent for the use of the judicial filibuster. Then Harry Reid created it for, I forget who the guy's name was, but Miguel Estrada, all the way back in the 2000s when Bush appointed him. They filibustered this like perfectly nice guy who was going to be like the first Latin American Supreme Court justice. They knew he was going to be it. It made his confirmation miserable. His wife ended up killing herself. Like, he was horrible. Yeah, it was horrible. But whatever. Okay, they had the judicial filibuster. Well, then we took power. We were in the minority, but had the filibuster. We started using it. So Harry Reid got rid of it. He changed the Senate rules to get rid of the filibuster he had had been the first one to use. This was just raw, total, who cares about it being hypocritical? Like, it's literally just raw power. We are the majority now, so the filibuster is awkward to us, so we're getting rid of it. Like, who cares that we're the ones who created the rule that said there should be a filibuster for just confirmations? Like, once you get that's how Democrats behave, they're just going to act in their self-interest. They're not going to be constrained by soft norms. They're not going to be constrained by soft precedents. That means you don't have to worry about the soft precedents you create. You should assume that they will go ahead and ignore them anyway.
There is nothing that the Democrat Party will not do to keep themselves in power.
One of the things I hope Republicans do, and I think it's really important that Republicans understand this, like, the next chance we get in the Senate, like, if we finally get 50 votes for this, we should get rid of the filibuster. And you might say, oh my gosh, that would be a huge violation of precedent. Well, have we not listened to Democrats for the last 10 years? Every one of them, say 2 in the last Senate majority, said they would have gotten rid of the filibuster if necessary. The only 2, why do I have balloon? I don't know.
Somehow it's not me.
2. So, that was somehow my who knows how that came about. I would
tell the editors to keep that in.
That's funny. But
so like, you say it was only Joe Manchin. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it was only Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema who wanted to keep the filibuster out of a 50-person Democrat caucus, and they're gone. I don't know that if Democrats got 51 votes, or even 50 in the vice presidency, the filibuster's gone next time around. They're not going to let Republicans stop them from doing what they want.
Oh, so we get rid of the filibuster now?
So we should just get rid of it first. Why do we have to wait for them to set the precedent? Like, let's just get rid of it first and do what we think is helps us. Why do we need to?
Okay, give me a practical example. I really love this, and we need to write a memo or clip this and send it to somebody. So let's talk about warfare conservatism as it applies in this specific instance where we have the filibuster, and we don't want to be peacetime conservatives that worry about setting precedents that Democrats could exploit in the future, but we want to be wartime conservatives and recognize that Democrats will do unprecedented things all the time. So apply to the filibuster.
So we would say it's the argument is that if the next time Democrats have the chance, they're going to do the unprecedented thing of getting rid of the filibuster. Guaranteed. There's nobody, whatever institutionalists were in the Democratic caucus in the Senate are gone.
Well, explain the filibuster for people that don't fully understand it. Like, when was it instituted? Why? And why is it bad? And
so I don't know that it's even bad in the general sense, right? If it's a norm that everybody agrees to. So the filibuster's been around. Gosh, I don't even know when it began, but it's been around the Senate for a very, very long time. The idea being that there's effectively you actually need a 3/5 majority to pass laws in the Senate. That's the Senate, because the idea is that to actually end debate, you need 60 votes. And that's, that has the effect of forcing compromises and making our system kind of have some amount of bipartisanship. And that's not a bad thing. So, in a world where we could expect the Democrats to adhere to norms, to uphold soft precedents, then we wouldn't want to get rid of the filibuster, because we could both cooperate to maintain this thing that is probably not good for the country. Right. Problem is, we know that Democrats do unprecedented things all the time. And nothing that the Democrats have been saying in the last 5 years should make us think or give us any sense of, calmness that if they take power again, they won't get rid of the filibuster, because the filibuster is counter-majoritarian. It functions to prevent, a simple majority from doing the things they want to do. But it can be removed by a simple majority, right? If the Democrats take the Senate again, with a simple majority, they can at the beginning of the Senate term, they can simply change the Senate rules and eliminate the filibuster. So if they can get rid of the filibuster with a simple majority, and there's no forces in their party that would say, no, be institutionalists, be institutionally conservative. We should maintain this thing that served the Senate well for so long, even if it hurt our own self-interests in the short term. They don't have anybody making that claim. We should expect that the filibuster will go away the next time the Democrats have power. And because we make that calculation, because this is a wartime domestic political environment, we should then be thinking about our own selfish interests. We shouldn't just cooperate. So, if I think, and this has happened in other cases. I mean, think about what Democrats did with Harry Reid is they said, we're going to get rid of the filibuster for all layer court appointees and cabinet officials. And then what Trump did in his first term and what McConnell did, credit to him, not that I like what McConnell's up to lately, but credit to him.
Not too much credit.
McConnell did change the set of rules, and he said, no, now we're going to remove the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees, and we're going to jam our Supreme Court nominees through on a simple majority. Like, obviously,
yes.
Right? That was a good call. That was wartime conservatism. That was good politics. And my point is that given this erosion in the filibuster and the, staggered, effectively, defections by each side, we just shouldn't expect that the filibuster will hold up.
So in other words, what you're saying is that during these 4 years, I'm praying for the Vance 8 years afterwards. And so one of the wartime tactics that I would have is, okay, let's do everything so that we have 12 years. So we should determine that we are going to win at all costs, all being not all, but at any cost necessary that is legal, so that we have the next 8 years and that there's a permanent change here. But my question to you about the filibuster is this. What item, if we have 4 years without the filibuster, that means with a very small majority vote that we can get through the Trump agenda. If we keep the filibuster, then it's still going to require that 2/3 majority to get it to vote. And then, is it 2/3 or 2/3? And
60
then
votes.
60 votes. And then he won't get anything. The Senate won't be bringing enough legislation that is pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, pro-America first to vote on. And so nothing's going to happen. So get rid of it now. And the Trump team can take charge and get things done. And even though the Democrats may have it in 4 years, we'll deal with it in 4 years.
Right. Well, the idea is that the Democrats inevitably will get rid of the filibuster. And so the question is, do we actually want to try and so do we want to do things with the majority we have now or not? And I don't know that we can win this debate, given that Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Mitch McConnell have a veto on that, right? The Democrats would never agree to it, obviously. So I don't know that we could get there, but I think that maybe in 2 years, if we win some Senate seats and McConnell's gone, things might be different.
I was very concerned about the horrific idea of them changing the composition of the court. And so that's one of those things where you think, suddenly we're going to have like 53 states. By the way, they wanted to make more than one state out of Washington, D.C. I don't know how that works, but Washington, D.C. being a state, Puerto Rico being a state, I don't know about Guam or whatever. And then they want to, pack the court with, 15 total liberal judges, and it would be a complete devastation. So if that's the argument, we have to I don't know if either one of those are addressed just by the Senate. So maybe it's not that dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a threat, and it's a reason. I mean, it's a reason, obviously, to think like why Republicans should never be willing to be a principal loser anymore. Because those are policies that are metapolitical. They are designed to permanently marginalize us, right? They want to destroy the Senate majority and the ability of the Republicans to have a Senate majority ever, right? They want enough new Democratic states to basically permanently marginalize it. We don't have to allow that. We should never allow that. And impacting the court is the same thing, right? They see the Supreme Court as a Republican power center, so they just want to take it from us. So we know this. We understand that this is how the Democrats think and what they're doing. So it becomes just very important to not do what we can with the power we have to try and keep them out of power and keep them from doing these things.
And that would allow us to address some of these other meta-political issues that you say are so important. And I agree that the election fraud and election system, do you not think that, tech is kind of half fixed for us? It's not maybe perfectly, but it's pretty good. What about electoral reform? How would you deal with that?
It would be great if, there was a lot of talk about, we shouldn't federalize elections. Like, nonsense. We should be mandating voter ID.
There are other federal requirements for elections. I mean, we don't micromanage the states, but shouldn't we require a federal ID? And is that constitutional?
Absolutely, it would be constitutional. I think that, the Congress has the authority under the Constitution to kind of set rules for elections of its own representatives, and I think they do for the president as well. We don't have to tolerate this world where voter ID isn't necessary, where fraud is essentially encouraged, and people are turning a blind eye to it. The reason the Democrats fight so hard against it is that they know they're the beneficiaries of all this fraud. They know that they're the ones with the machine politics going on in big blue cities. So, that's the kind of thing. Now, we probably can't do that with a filibuster, which is why we should be willing to get rid of the filibuster to pass voter ID laws.
To do that, to do election reform. On the lawfare front, the Democrats have used lawfare for 4 years now, actually longer. What am I saying? Longer than 4 years. And we don't want to do things that are unethical in the sense of, I don't know, how would you put it? We want to use the legal system aggressively to bring about justice. And I think that there are so many Americans, conservatives, America First, that we're so sick of, they never pay a price. There's no deterrence whatsoever. So get your bleach bit and get your hammer out. And I hear that, in the Pentagon, they're shredding files. Epstein files are being, tossed. So what do we do in terms of putting deterrence back into our legal system, which would not be using law as lawfare as classically would be defined?
So I think the way to understand this is that, Democrats went absolutely wild during the Biden administration, going after their political opponents in any number of ways. State level, federal level. Their prosecutions were unbelievably aggressive, legally very, very tenuous, and they did them anyway, and they went to war with Republicans over it. There should be punishment for that. And even if we can't win, that anybody engaging in that was actually engaging in a crime, it's not clear that they were. They were just abusing, they were abusing the legal system, but in a way that didn't violate the letter of the law. Well, then we should be willing to do the same thing to them. Which is make colorable, aggressive arguments and prosecute people when there's a colorable basis to do so. Even if, in a different world, a better one, there would be sort of a norm understanding that, basically the two sides need to honor each other, to have respect for each other in a real democracy, right? We should be constantly trying to wipe each other out. But we don't have that norm, and the Democrats don't abide by it. So
explain the difference between a frivolous lawsuit without merit that I suppose is unethical and you could be, brought before the bar or whatever, and colorable. Explain colorable.
So frivolous is, just there's no basis in law to argue something, right? Like, it's just a ridiculous, lawless argument. And it's the kind of argument that would get a lawyer sanctioned if they brought it, would get thrown out, it would just get it wouldn't get you anywhere. And then a colorable argument is that there's some basis to, there's some basis in the text to argue it. There's some legitimate argument for an extent of the law to extend or be changed in a certain way. And it's just, colorable doesn't mean you're going to win. Colorable doesn't even mean you're likely to win necessarily, but colorable means you're making a good faith argument that the law should apply to something. And that the law should apply a certain way. And I think it's important. Making frivolous arguments, it's just bad for you, even from like a purely selfish perspective, because you're going to lose on a frivolous argument every time. You're going to have ethics problems as a result.
Right.
But colorable arguments are just aggressive use of the legal system, aggressive but lawful. And that's what we should be trying to do. I think that for too long, conservatives have been conservative about the way that they've approached litigation.
Are there enough attorneys to do this? Are there enough attorneys in the whole United States that have our ethic and worldview to, there are so many people that need to be taken to court. That's my humble opinion. I think
we have a lot of good people coming into DOJ. I think people like Harvey Dillon are really, I think, going to be incredible at civil rights. I mean, Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Emil Bo, these guys are all great. And I think they're really going to do a great job on this one.
I mean, should we be going after?
We are. A good question where the Supreme Court is going to let us go after the spending, but that's a good example of us being aggressive. Like the administration just decided we're just going to stop giving money to USAID and shut it down. We're going to chat, and we know that, we are a lock to be able to do that. And, the court might stop us, but we think there's a good faith basis to argue that we ought to have this authority. So we're going to do it, and we're going to be aggressive. That's a good example of the type of, wartime conservatism, aggressive use of the legal system that we're trying to